Edward Colon is the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator as well as UNDP Resident Representative in Nigeria. He represents the UN Secretary General in the country. He officially began his tour of duty in Nigeria just over a month ago. During that period, he has been to Nigeria's northeast for a first-hand assessment of the humanitarian situation there. We'll bring you his assessment. Also on the program, we go to the Gambia, where President Adama Barrow has been formally sworn in as president. We bring you scenes from the ceremony and what the president said. Finally, we go to the United States of America, where Donald Trump has continued to double down on the media, launching blistering attacks on them. I am Segun Ojumu, and this is Hindsight. Segun Ojumu. On this program, we'll be bringing you news, views, and exclusive interviews with
security that cut across humanitarian aid to.
It becomes easier to do business in Nigeria. Now,
Nigeria.
we begin the program here in Abuja, where Nigeria and Spain are to put in place mechanisms which would deepen bilateral relations between both countries. This came as the outcome of a bilateral meeting held between the countries in Abuja on Monday. Representing Nigeria was the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Shola Enikonlayi. He told Spain's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Delfonso Castro, Nigeria needs Spain as a partner as it seeks to diversify its economy. Mr. Castro also expressed the willingness of his country to foster trade relations between Nigeria and Spain. Discussion between both countries also touched on security, migration, and the humanitarian situation in Nigeria's northeast. Spain also commended Nigeria for its leadership role in Africa, especially for its handling of Gambia's recent political crisis. Here's more on what was said at that meeting.
On security, we reviewed the ongoing campaign against Boko Haram, and the Spanish Secretary of State congratulated the Nigerian government for the success we have recorded in terms of the counter-insurgency, and also look forward to more assistance in the area of humanitarian support for the IDPs in reconstruction and development. We also look at the EU-Nigeria migration dialogue, and we agree that this discussion will continue based on mutual respect and with a view to arriving at a balanced agreement between the two sides.
You have different fields to improve our cooperation, energy, trade, investment, to have a strong legal framework to support Spanish investment is important. We have to every time it's a permanent exercise to improve it, and I think that I received good news about the double taxation issue, so it's also good news. I'm happy.
8.5 million. That is the number of people in Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe states who will require humanitarian assistance. 6.9 million. That is a number out of the 8.5 million who are the most critically in need. They will be targeted by humanitarian partners. More than $1 billion is needed to care for the 6.9 million people just mentioned. These were some of the numbers reeled out by Mr. Edward Colon last week. Mr. Colon is the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, as well as the UNDP Resident Representative in Nigeria. He told journalists millions of people in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe are in danger if humanitarian assistance doesn't get to them early. He also said that more than 1 million IDPs have returned to their local government areas of origin, mainly Adamawa and Yobe, since August 2015, and the number continues to increase rapidly. He, however, said many of them are stranded in secondary displacement sites because of ongoing insecurity, destroyed infrastructure, and absence of basic services. Before we give you a deeper sense of what was said at that meeting with journalists, here is a report on that.
I saw children who have access to no food. I saw widows with no source of livelihoods. I saw youths idling, sitting under the trees, and a very, very bad signal for radicalization.
Edward Kalon painting a very grim picture of the crisis in the northeast. He has been visiting Borno, Adamawa and Yobe states. Scenes like these are what he was confronted with during his trip. He also saw this: displaced people. There are over 2 million of them uprooted from their homes by the Boko Haram insurgency. In the midst of all this, Mr. Kalon sees a ray of hope. Some achievements have been made by humanitarian organizations.
Food assistance to the displaced people have grown from reaching 600,000 people in August to 2.1 million people by December last year, which is already a 350% increase.
In spite of these gains, the UN representative says progress has been hampered by funding. This comes amid allegations relief materials have been diverted by officials. Does he think Nigerian authorities are underreporting the scale of the Northeast crisis?
They are overwhelmed, but nobody can deny the face of the human suffering that is currently taking place in parts of this country.
The Humanitarian Response Plan 2017 for Nigeria is in need of more than $1 billion to meet the needs of the 6.9 million people the UN wants to provide assistance to. It is hoping to raise more than half of this at the end of the donor conference in Oslo, Norway's capital, next week. If it fails, like it did in 2016, vulnerable children, women, girls, and youth will be exposed to realities Nigeria may fail to deal with in the future. One thing you didn't hear Mr. Kalon say in that report is that the humanitarian crisis in the Northeast is the fourth largest crisis after Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. Here is Mr. Kalon again speaking about the situation in Nigeria's Northeast and the way forward.
National Conference on Nigeria and the Lake Chad Basin is being organized in Norway next week. This is a great opportunity for the international community to make meaningful commitments towards funding our humanitarian response activities. It is also an opportunity for the government of Nigeria to tell the world the true extent of this crisis. The humanitarian response plan for 2017 for Nigeria is seeking $1 billion to meet the needs of 6.9 million people targeted. And the crisis in the Northeast Nigeria is today the fourth largest crisis in the world. I repeat, the crisis in Northeast today is the fourth largest humanitarian crisis in the world after Syria, Yemen, Iraq. We are hoping to raise more than this amount of money at the end of the conference in Oslo. A repeat of the 2016 situation when activities were severely hampered by funding shortfall. And I want to also inform the press today, there's a lot of misinformation out there that the United Nations received $480 million in 2015. It is not correct, and please quote it from me. 480 million was the requirement for 2015. The humanitarian community received only 52% of that money, which means we got 225 million from the total 480 million that was requested. We are hoping that if we get the funding this year, we'll be able to address vulnerability among children, women, girls, and youths, and also start the daunting task of helping them find durable solutions to their realities.
We'll take a quick break now and then Hindsight returns. Please stay with us. On this program, we'll be bringing you news, views, and exclusive interviews with
security that cut across humanitarian aid to.
It becomes easier to do business in Nigeria. Now,
Nigeria
Welcome back. You're still watching Hindsight. Now, let's change gears now and go to the Gambia, where that country over the weekend formally swore in its new elected president, Adama Barrow, in the front of a crowd of thousands, including African heads of state. For those who have followed the story, they will know it was the second time he had taken the oath after his formal inauguration was delayed by the reluctance of his predecessor to leave office. Mr. Barrow told the crowd that the Gambian people now had the power to control their own destiny and that he was going to free political prisoners and improve press freedom. He eventually did free some political prisoners. Now, the president also spoke of pressing economic challenges left over from the rule of his predecessor, Yahya Jammeh. Take a listen to this part of his speech.
We will strive to ensure the survival, protection, and development of all children. The Ministry of Health and Social Welfare is charged with the responsibility of doing an inventory on the needs of the hospitals in the country in order to determine the input necessary to upgrade the health centers, the health services. It is to ensure staff audit in order to identify concerns and develop programs to enhance staff motivation. The government will seek to partner with ECOWAS, AU, the UN, or the traditional development partners like the US, and work with our development partners to make free education a reality. Agriculture shall be given added support to move towards food security and growth in export.
Let's bring you the story from the weekend. We take you to the Netherlands, where Dutch populist leader Geert Wilders launched his election campaign by calling some Moroccans scum. Mr. Wilders tops opinion polls ahead of the 15th of March parliamentary vote, but he has seen his lead reduced in recent weeks. He has previously vowed to ban Muslim immigration and shut mosques if he wins. His latest comments come 2 months after he was convicted in a hate speech trial over his promise to reduce the number of Moroccans in the country. He did, however, emphasize that he thought not all are scum, in his exact words. According to the 2011 census, where there were more than 167,000 Moroccan-born residents of the Netherlands, making up the third largest group of non-EU residents, a figure that does not take into account second or third generation Moroccans. Mr. Wilders, his Freedom Party holds 12 of the 150 seats in the lower house of parliament, but his nearest rival, right-wing Prime Minister Mark Rutte, has narrowed the lead with just a month until election is held. Analysts say Mr. Wilders, if he wins, may struggle to put together a coalition, as leading parties have said they would not work with him. Mr. Wilders, his 3-week trial last year was triggered when police received 6,400 complaints about remarks he made during a municipal election campaign in The Hague. Now, finally, we go to the United States, where President Donald Trump launched another fierce attack on the media at a campaign rally for America event in the state of Florida over the weekend. Mr. Trump told the crowd in Melbourne the media did not want to, quote, report the truth, end of quote, and had their own agenda. The U.S. president also defended the achievements of his presidency so far, insisting that spirit of optimism was sweeping the U.S. His criticism at the weekend came after Mr. Trump had attacked the media at a press conference on Thursday as pressure mounted on his presidency. His national security advisor, Michael Flynn, quit earlier in the week. Mr. Trump is to interview, of course, he has already interviewed other candidates for that, and replacement have been nominated. Just yesterday at that press conference, Mr. Trump yet again denied any links with Mr. Vladimir Putin and Russia. Take a listen.
Thank you very much. I have no loans in Russia. I don't have any deals in Russia. President Putin called me up very nicely to congratulate me on the win of the election. He then called me up extremely nicely to congratulate me on the inauguration, which was terrific. But so did many other leaders, almost all other leaders from almost all other countries. So that's the extent. Russia is fake news. This is fake news put out by the media. The real news is the fact that people, probably from the Obama administration, because they're there, because we have our new people going in place right now. As you know, Mike Pompeo is now taking control of the CIA. James Comey at FBI. Dan Coates is waiting to be approved. I mean, he is a senator and a highly respected one. And he's still waiting to be approved. But our new people are going in. And just while you're at it, because you mentioned this, Wall Street Journal did a story today that was almost as disgraceful as the failing New York Times' story yesterday. And it talked about, you saw it front page. So, Director of National Intelligence just put out, acting, a statement. Any suggestion that the United States intelligence community, this was just given to us, is withholding information and not providing the best possible intelligence to the president and his national security team is not true. So they took this front page story out of the Wall Street Journal, top, and they just wrote the story that it's not true. And I'll tell you something, I'll be honest, because I sort of enjoy this back and forth, and I guess I have all my life, but I've never seen more dishonest media than, frankly, the political media. I thought the financial media was much better, much more honest. But I will say that I never get phone calls from the media. How do they write a story like that in the Wall Street Journal without asking me? Or how do they write a story in the New York Times, put it on front page? That was like the story they wrote about the women and me. Front page, big, massive story.
Mr. Donald Trump, or President Donald Trump, blasting what he calls fake news. I assure you that we're not faking anything here as we leave the program here today. Let's keep the conversation going online. We're on Twitter. Tweet us and we'll tweet you right back at Hindsight STV, or email us on hindsightsilverbird@gmail.com. See you again next week. I am Shegun Ojumu. Goodbye.